Hi everybody. In this lesson we want to look at some rational exponents. Now a rational exponent, remember in math whenever you hear rational you should think ratio, and ratio is a fraction. So these are fractional exponents, and in particular we want to look at fractional exponents where the numerator is 1. So let's think about what 9 to the 1/2 power might possibly mean. So if we think about this, by our rules of exponents, I know that 9 to the 1/2, if I were to square this, I would have to multiply the exponents, right? That would give me 9 to the 1/2 times 2, which is 9 to the 1st power. So then I have to think to myself, all right, if I'm squaring a number to get 9, what number would that have to be? Right? So the number we square to get 9 is 3, so it should make sense that 9 to the 1/2 is equal to 3. Okay? All right, in the same way, suppose I wanted to know what 8 to the 1/3 power was, and again, if I think about 8 to the 1/3 and I cube that, then again by my rules of exponents I would have to multiply the exponent, and the 3 times the 1/3 would give me 8 to the 1st power. So think to yourself, what number do I cube to get 8? Well, that's 2, right? Because 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 8. So it makes sense that this 8 to the 1/3 power would have to equal 2. And with that, I think that you'll come to see that there's a relationship between these fractional exponents and the root. 9 to the 1/2 really is the square root of 9, which is 3, and 8 to the 1/3 is the cube root of 8, which is 2. In the same way, 32 to the 1/5 power is the 5th root of 32. And the number that I multiply by itself 5 times to get 32 is 2. Okay? So that's the idea behind fractional exponents where the numerator is 1. More generally, a to the 1 over n power is the same thing as the nth root of a. All right, so we see there's definitely a relationship between exponents and radicals. All right, so if I wanted to know what 64 to the 1/2 is, I think to myself, oh, well, that's the square root of 64. Now, we don't normally write a 2 index there, and we usually just write it as the square root of 64, but that would be 8. All right? If I wanted the negative root, then I'd have to put the negative out front. This would be negative the square root of 64. That would be negative 8. And if I took negative 64 to the 1/2 power, notice my base is negative 64. That would be the square root of negative 64. And we know that that is not a real number, because there's no real number that I can square to get a negative number. So 64 to the 1/3, that would be the cube root of 64. And that's going to be 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. If I wanted negative 64 to the 1/3, again, by your rules of operations, you'd have to take the cube root of 64 first, and then put the minus out front of that. So this would be a negative 4. And if I wanted to end up with a minus sign inside, then I have to put the minus in parentheses around the base. So this would be the cube root of negative 64. And this one, I can take odd roots of negative numbers. That's also negative 4, although for a slightly different reason, for this one being negative 4. Okay? All right, so if I wanted to express this using rational exponents, I could just write this as 6x squared y. That's my base, and the 5th root is the same thing as raising it to the 1/5 power. Okay, so you could maybe just leave it like that, or if you wanted to, you could write that as 6 to the 1/5, x squared to the 1/5, and y to the 1/5. So depending upon what you wanted to do with this expression, you might write it as just leave it like up here, or write this, you'd multiply your exponents here, x to the 2/5, y to the 1/5. So either one of those would be fine. Okay, so last problem here, if I wanted to evaluate the 6th root of 29 on my calculator, there's two ways to do that. I can either use my xth root button. I'd put the number 6 in first here. And then I go to the math menu, and then under the number 5 here, that would be the xth root. And the 6th root of 29 we see here is 1.7528 blah blah blah. And the other way I could do that, since it's kind of clunky doing all this, is I can just right from my home screen just put in 29 and raise it to the 1/6 power, and that'll do the same thing for me. I should of course get the same thing. Okay.